Well, two-thirds of Australian parents believe digital money is making it harder for children to grasp the value of real money, and they struggle to teach them. 3 in 5 parents believe this invisible money generation will be financially worse off than their own
But
generation.
digital money is real money. It is real money.
It doesn't look like real money, though, does it?
No.
Research in the Australian Journal of Psychology panellists suggests we need to look at money in a different way in order to be happy. A study of 3,000 people found that if you associate money with power and freedom, you're less satisfied with many aspects of your life. Whereas, if you associate money with security, you're more happy with your finances and health. And those who saw money as love were happy with most aspects of their life, particularly family life. How do you both see money?
I collect moments and memories, not money.
Oh, nice. See, you are both marvellous people.
I find money deeply terrifying, so I've had to teach myself to be good at managing it and good at thinking about it productively. So, you know, if I was to do my investment profile, I'd be very conservative, but yet I've had to, you know, I run my own business, and you have to juggle things, and you have to be on top of things, and you can't put your head in the sand. You have to be realistic, and so I've had to force myself to overcome my natural fear of, I don't know, messing up or losing it in some horrific fashion. I don't know. I'm touching wood here. There's some wood around here. I'm touching it.
Here's something you may know as a writer. The English, just to close on this today, the English language has illogicalities, and one of them is the lack of a singular pronoun to replace he and she in this gender fluid age. Everyone loves their mother is only grammatical if it's, you know, all people love their mothers. Catherine, I know Peter is also very literate, but do you wrestle with this in your sentences?
Do I wrestle with it? Well,
Yes.
Occasionally, because, I mean, sometimes you're having to say his or her instead of
Yes.
their. So I would probably use their because most of the time, or either try and avoid it, but if it was like in a colloquial piece of dialogue or something, I'd use their instead of his or her. And in terms of saying it, I don't really have any problem with saying they instead of he or she. It takes a little bit of practice.
If anyone comes to the door, tell him or her to wait.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Scholarship, I just found this interesting. Scholarship, and so did other people because it's been widely reported, scholarship at the University of Illinois has unearthed references to their singular being used in books dating back to the 14th century. So we used it for a while, and then it became...
Yeah. Well, you is plural
out of
and
fashion.
singular,
Yes.
isn't it? So
And it was just the same
yeah.
for there, apparently.
There you go.
There you go.
I cringe and my heart sinks when I hear people say use.
Use.
I mean, and I've heard it overseas as well. I mean, you know, in Europe they do it as well. You know, I can't even think of a sentence because it cringes.
I thought use jokers was just a New Zealandism, but
no,
it's not,
I've heard it in Europe. I've heard it in the
Use.
US. Yeah, use.
Yeah.
Was that like y'all in America in the South or something?
Sort of, yeah, I suppose.
Colloquial
Yeah.
way of saying you.
Use jokers,
Lot.
use fellas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I like y'all. That's great.
It'd be another Americanism we could adopt, Catherine. Thank you, y'all.
Y'all probably beg to differ.
Kia whaawihi whawhatai.
Whawhatai lava.
And Catherine Robertson, lovely to have you on, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're back with the panel tomorrow. Thanks for your company today, everyone, and Checkpoint is on the way.
Tō te maira e hoa mai he kōrero kei te haere hei kaupapa kei te karawhio. Welcome to Checkpoint. Tonight, MP salaries will be frozen for a year. Jane Patterson has the latest. Also tonight, intensive grain-fed beef farming. Drone footage of a feedlot in the South Island. The owners have consent to intensively farm in close quarters 19,000 cattle. EQC restructures in Christchurch. It just doesn't seem to have told everyone. At least 350 people are dead in the Indian state of Kerala. Another series of strong quakes has rocked the Indonesian island of Lombok. The Air Chatham's flight from the Kapiti coast begins a new service with Auckland, and a British woman survives more than 10 hours floating in the Adriatic Sea after falling from a cruise liner. All of that and more coming up after the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, I'm Susana Leatawa. The Prime Minister has announced that the government will freeze MP salaries and allowances for a year. The Remuneration Authority recently recommended a 3% increase for the coming year, which Jacinda Ardern says was not acceptable. Urgent legislation will have to be passed in order for the freeze to take effect before the Remuneration Authority increase comes into force. Last year, MPs all received a pay rise of about 2.5%. Ms Ardern says the move is about the government's values.
We are focused on lifting the incomes of lower middle income earners, and also acknowledge that there has been an increasing gap between those income earners and those at the other end. We are at the other end. It's just not right for us to have an increase like that.
Jacinda Ardern. A woman has been remanded in custody in Fiji in relation to trafficking workers to New Zealand. The 31-year-old was arrested in Suva on Thursday, and she's to reappear in the High Court in Suva next month. FBC News reports she was charged with 11 counts of obtaining property by deception and 1 count of money laundering. Her sister, who lives in Australia, has been charged in absentia, and an arrest warrant is expected to be filed. The pair are alleged to have helped in the trafficking of 17 victims in 2014. The women are accused of receiving money from Feroz Ali, who was convicted in 2016 of human trafficking offences. The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters says increasing the number of police officers on the ground will get the message through that crime doesn't pay. The police say they will be spreading the 1,800 additional officers around the country. The extra police are part of the coalition agreement between New Zealand First and Labour. Mr Peters says New Zealand will turn its crime rate around by putting more money into prevention, which means more police on the street.
No, once people get the lesson that crime doesn't pay, they'll stop trying to make it pay. It's paying now, and it has been paying up this time because you can get away with it.
The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters. The hospital doctor of a woman who died from multiple brain injuries believed she was dealing with someone who was drunk. A report by the Health and Disability Commissioner found the woman was given inadequate care by those involved. When the 18-year-old was admitted to hospital, a witness quoted the doctor as saying staff were not here to babysit drunks. A nurse who assessed the woman didn't make any neurological observations, and the doctor stated she had no obvious head injury. It was only when police requested a blood test that it was discovered she didn't have any alcohol in her system. The doctor will undergo a performance assessment, and there may be a review into the competence of the nurses. The St John Ambulance Service and Ngati Porou Hauora Charitable Trust have been referred to the Director of Proceedings to decide if any further action should be taken. An Auckland recycling company says a $3 million government grant to build a new waste plant will greatly reduce the amount of waste it sends to landfill. The government has granted Green Gorilla the money to build a new commercial and industrial waste sorting facility in Onehunga. Its Waste Minimisation Fund channels money collected from landfill levies to businesses trying to reduce waste going to landfill. Green Gorilla co-owner Ray Harris says he's passionate about reducing the amount of waste sent to landfill.
It's key to our industry here, really. So once we get the new sort line, we're going to, be producing even more and more recyclables from diversion from landfills.
Mr Harris says the new plant will cut the amount of landfill waste by around 30%. A New Zealand aid worker on the Indonesian island of Lombok says 2 people were reportedly killed in a series of strong earthquakes overnight. The quakes hit late at night, the strongest measured 6.9 and sent many people running onto the streets in panic. Charlie Fennick is based in the city of Mataram, the largest city on the island. She says further north there is nothing but rubble and tarps, and there are outbreaks of disease.
We got a call a couple of days ago saying that 2 camps of 100 each had been found and they hadn't had any relief since the earthquake. The first one, which was 2 weeks, and a woman had just given birth in the camp, so we kind of mobilised to get an express shipment of food and water to them.
Aid worker Charlie Fennick, who is based in the city of Mataram, Lombok. The police are investigating a threat to use the poison 1080 in public places in Palmerston North. They've been interviewing a person they believe may be involved. The threats, which were made on Friday, included placing the poison at Freiburg Community Pool. The police searched a property near Palmerston North this morning and have been interviewing a man. No 1080 was found, and the police are still deciding if they will lay charges. It's 5:05. The All Blacks aren't surprised by the Wallabies' decision to spend this week on Waiheke Island. Australia are preparing for Saturday's second Bledisloe Cup test away from the Auckland mainland as they attempt to break their 32-year losing streak at Eden Park. After the All Blacks were 25-point winners in last weekend's first test in Sydney, halfback Aaron Smith says it isn't a shock to see the Wallabies doing things differently.
Seems pretty normal, to be honest. I think maybe their preparation before this first test was different to the past. The first 30 minutes they were very dominant, very up for it, physically, mentally, and they put us under a lot of pressure. But we learnt a lot from the first test.
Aaron Smith. Scott Dixon knows he needs top results in the final 3 races of the IndyCar season to win his 5th title. The Auckland driver avoided a multi-car crash to fight back from 13th on the grid and finish 3rd at this morning's race in Pocono. Dixon still had his overall lead cut to 29 points as nearest rival Alexander Rossi won his 2nd straight race, a run the New Zealander hopes won't last.
We did okay today on points, but obviously took a big hit to Rossi again. Congrats to him. You know, he's driving fantastically at the moment. We're going to need to have him to have a bit of a snafu and slow his roll here quickly.
Scott Dixon. And Hockey New Zealand will conduct an independent inquiry into the culture of the national women's team. Hockey New Zealand met with the Players Association this morning after revelations that Black Sticks coach Mark Hager accidentally sent an email to his squad criticising several players. That's the news.
Throwing away old rubbish.
So they get dumped in landfill, or there's all sorts of worse frauds. They rent an empty warehouse and fill it up with tyres and then walk away.
Throwing away old Australian Prime Ministers.
Dropping from 39 to 33 overnight, and that is probably the most significant drop.
And not throwing it away just yet.
My big concern is that that's not going to happen with the current younger generation. So that's really why I'm in this game.
Where the rubber hits the road. Morning reports with Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, targeting a golden hive of criminal activity, how state-of-the-art analytical techniques are being used to target beehive theft. And after 10, a parent's worst nightmare, mother and daughter companion books on coming back from a world of drugs, alcohol and prostitution. Join me, Lynn Freeman, and for Catherine Ryan on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service till midnight tomorrow. For the whole of the North Island, except Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, periods of rain, sometimes heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms. Easing to a few showers tonight, showers becoming more frequent later tomorrow morning, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms then too. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered rain developing this afternoon, clearing overnight. Cloudy periods tomorrow, a few showers in the afternoon and evening, possibly heavy with hail. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, rain or showers at times, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms. Westland and Fiordland, showers, some heavy in Westland, with possible thunderstorms north of Hokitika today. Canterbury, North Otago and Central Otago, mainly fine, isolated showers tomorrow. Dunedin, Clutha and Southland, scattered rain, clearing Southland this afternoon, isolated showers tomorrow, but more widespread about coastal Southland and Stewart Island. And the Chatham Islands, showers, clearing this afternoon, rain developing overnight, easing to a few showers tomorrow afternoon. You're with Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Thank you so much, Susanna. It's lovely to have you with us. It's 9 minutes past 5. Thank you all for joining us on the show this evening. We're going to begin tonight with news that MPs, including Cabinet Ministers, will not get a pay rise this year, with the Prime Minister announcing a year-long freeze on politicians' salaries. Now, the Remuneration Authority recently recommended an increase of about 3% for the coming year, but Jacinda Ardern says that doesn't feel right.
That is not acceptable to this government. Cabinet has today confirmed a decision to freeze MP salaries and allowances for a year while we develop what we believe will be a fairer formula for future pay increases. Cabinet agreed that while the government is focused on improving incomes for ordinary working Kiwis, it's just not appropriate for MPs to be the subject of such an increase. Now, this move doesn't save a lot of money in the scheme of things, but it does send, we believe, a strong signal about what our government values, what we stand for, and our determination, of course, to make sure that the economy is working for everyone.
Jacinda Ardern speaking a short time ago. MPs' pay, of course, is an issue that gets people talking. Let's talk with our political editor now, Jane Patterson. Jane, nice to have you with us from the gallery office. What's all this about?
So what this is about is the constant wrestle that MPs have had, not just this year and not this government, but in past governments as well. We have the Remuneration Authority, that's an independent body, independent of Parliament, and it sets the rates that MPs should get and pay increases every year. And this is the base salary, but also for all of their expenses and for superannuation as well. So the battle that they've had in past years is when it's not a great environment, and that would include National Party going through the global financial crisis, and now a Labour Party and a Green and the coalition government having campaigned on income inequality and the divide between the rich and the poor. So MPs get these determinations setting out increases. They have tried to push back in the past. In fact, John Key changed the rules in 2015 to try to bring those rates down. Jacinda Ardern says the formula is still delivering pay increases that she does not feel are appropriate, and this year it was going to be about 3%, so it's put an immediate freeze on basically this determination, the draft determination coming into effect later this month.
Of course, there's lots of talk about spending, isn't there? The nurses' pay round, the teachers' pay round, Simon Bridges and his leaked expenses. Is that part of the broader context here?
So firstly, we'll take Simon Bridges' spending controversy. So of course last week we covered not just the leak of that information, but the amount that the opposition leader spent on travel and accommodation, mainly Crown limos. So we asked the Prime Minister, when did Cabinet Ministers start to think about this freeze? So we wanted to know whether it was in the context of the Simon Bridges story and a reaction to that. She said no, that they had got the draft determination from the authority a few weeks ago and had already started discussions about how to deal with it well before Simon Bridges. In terms of the strikes, the teachers' strikes and the recent nurses' strikes, this would all play into the decision making, because it would have been seen as highly hypocritical for MPs and cabinet ministers accepting pay increases, and of course the higher that your salary is, the bigger proportionately that your increase is. So it wouldn't have been a great look at all for the MPs to take these increases while we have people out on strike and struggling against low income. So that was clearly what's driven it. It's smart politics, because it doesn't matter how much MPs try to justify the fact that it wasn't their decision, people still place the responsibility for the increase on them.
What happens now, Jane?
So when the House comes back, so we've got 2 weeks of recess, there'll be urgent legislation passed to basically nullify or freeze this determination. Then the Minister for Workplace Relations, Enlise Galloway, is going to look at a formula that's going to come back with a better result in terms of increase of pay that might match other factors better. And we don't know exactly what that's going to be. There was talk this afternoon about the inflation rate, or whether you look at the wider pay increases across the board. So in 2015, the national government tied MPs' increases to public sector wage increases. So one thing could be to put it out across all pay increase in the public and private sector. That may smooth it out, but we're not sure exactly what that's going to look like. That will be up to Minister Enlise Galloway to sort out and come back with some new legislation for the authority.
Jane Patterson, our political editor, with the news that the Prime Minister announced just after 4 o'clock. Thanks so much, Jane. We appreciate it. Right, this is a bit of an exercise. Close your eyes, unless you're driving, obviously, and picture beef farming in New Zealand. For most of us, I suspect we're conjuring up greenhouse, cattle grazing on grass. And for the most part, that's what beef farming is in New Zealand. But becoming increasingly common alongside that is American-style intensive grain-fed beef farming. Cattle bunched together for months at a time while they're fattened up on maize, grains and molasses. They're called feedlots, and we've been doing stories on them now for a little while. Today we were given footage of the biggest one in the country by animal welfare group SAFE. In the South Island, it has consent to intensively farm in close quarters 19,000 cattle. Now, it's not a new farm, but it represents a style of farming that SAFE and other groups say has no place in New Zealand. Would love your opinion on that, but first, Zach Fleming has more.
Nearly 20,000 cattle are allowed on this feedlot.
Do you think this is in New Zealand?
I hope it's not.
No, that looks like somewhere in Russia.
It's in Ashburton, an hour-and-a-half drive south of Christchurch. 5 Star Beef Limited, established in 1991, this is New Zealand's biggest beef feedlot. These cattle spend 6 months grazing, eating grass, and then they're moved here, locked in square, uncovered pens, given vaccinations to prevent disease, and fed grains for anywhere from 2.5 to 8 months. Grain-fed plus movement restricted equals fat cattle fast. But animal welfare group SAFE has serious concerns about both animal welfare and the environmental impact of having nearly 20,000 cattle confined.
The farmers who are doing this, they're just wanting to make a quick buck by putting the animals in these sorts of feedlots. And, it's putting our international reputation at risk.
The 5 Star Beef feedlot isn't the only one in New Zealand, it's just by far the biggest. Most others are several thousand cattle at most. SAFE is calling on Environment Minister David Parker to ban feedlots.
They've got no shelter, so in the blazing hot sun or from the freezing winter temperatures, they're just there in those barren pens. There's no grass, it's called a zero grazing system, and those animals are forced onto a grain diet for the months before they're slaughtered for beef, and that can cause a lot of welfare issues as well. The grain can cause bloating and diarrhoea in those animals.
Fish and Game want them banned too. Chief Executive Martin Taylor says they're at odds with attempts to clean up our waterways.
The Ministry of the Environment is quite clear that sediment runoff is one of the big problems for New Zealand. We know it's damaging the environment, and yet we allow practices like feedlots to continue. One of the indictments on New Zealand is that we identify an issue, which is erosion and sediment, and then we just turn a blind eye to what's causing it. And one of the things that are causing it is feedlots. Intensive farming is not good for the country.
And taking the footage of the Ashburton feedlot onto the streets of Auckland today, many people don't want beef from one on their plate.
If you went to a restaurant and you found out that your beef was coming from here, would that bother you?
Oh yeah, I'll be out of there. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's disgusting.
If that's on there, I wouldn't buy it. Yeah, I'd probably become a vegetarian.
Really?
Yeah, I'm very close to a vegetarian.
So if your choice was to eat beef from a feedlot farm or be vegetarian, you would choose to not eat meat?
Vegetarian, yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Which is interesting because the beef from the 5 Star Beef feedlot is sold extensively throughout the country under the brand Wakanui Beef. Most of it's exported overseas, but it is in our supermarkets and more than 200 restaurants, from the low end right up to 5-star dining. A full list of stockists is available on the Wakanui website, but no restaurants Checkpoint called today were prepared to talk about why they use it. And Ansco, which owns the feedlot, wasn't available for an interview today either, but it said in a statement that it adheres to the highest standards of animal welfare, that grain-finished products provide a premium niche option for consumers. There's an average of 14,000 cattle on site, and the average length of stay is 120 days. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
We'd love your feedback on that. 2101 is the text number, of course. Email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We'll have more on this after 6, an interview with Beef and Lamb Chief Executive Sam McIver. Now, Beef and Lamb have talked in the past about grass-fed beef being an advantage for New Zealand. How do they feel about grain feeding? We'll ask them. But we head now to Christchurch. And with the government due to announce the members of its inquiry into EQC in the not too distant future, where are the re-repairs at? And how many homes are there with foundations that were inadequately repaired or had damage that was missed completely? We've been asking those questions for months now, and whilst we've seen lawyers, engineers and academics estimate the value of damage beneath the city's floor, we've never had a figure from EQC. The figure is important for a number of reasons. It's a liability and will have to be met even if EQC runs out of money, full stop. And there's little point repairing walls and ceilings if floors and foundations still need to be done. Plus there's the issue of on-sols. EQC Sid Miller with the big picture in a moment. But first, Anita. She's in dispute with EQC over damage below her carpet damage, the original scope and therefore repairs completely missed.
No, our carpet at that stage had not been lifted.
And so you had been told by inference, I guess, by omission, that there was nothing wrong with your floors, that there was some cosmetic repair work to be done, and that was that.
That's correct. We had all our walls inside and out. There was cracking, so that was plastered and painted. The upstairs level, which is wooden, the scope of work said nail floorboards. When we came back to the house, we said to the builder, you didn't do the job because our flooring is still wavy, we're still tripping over it. And he said, no, we did. We lifted the carpet, but we didn't nail the floorboards, we screwed them down. You should be really pleased because screwing the floorboards down is way better than nailing them. And I said, well, you might have done that. And he did. He showed me that it had been screwed. He showed me evidence that had happened. I said, you might have done that, but the floor is still not flat. And he said, the word flat was omitted from your scope of work. So if it had said nail floorboards flat, you would have a flat floor.
So your scope didn't say flat, therefore the floor didn't have to be flat?
Correct. It was screwed back down in exactly the wonky position it had been in. I think they only did what a half-blind naked eye could see.
And so you start the process, and we have heard this very many times, of dealing with the EQC and getting a case manager, right?
Yes.
And how many case managers do you think you've had now?
Well, I've just been reading something I wrote about this around a year ago, and at that stage I estimated we'd had about a dozen case managers. I have truly lost count. I've had case managers I've not even had correspondence with because they disappeared in a few days before we were supposed to make contact.
And Anita, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is material. Every time you get a new case manager, do you kind of start from scratch in terms of their knowledge of your case?
Pretty much, because we've had, especially in the early days, we had a lot of verbal promises from case managers, and of course they wouldn't write that down, and we didn't know that we had to record everything and get everything in writing. I've asked for the last maybe 2 or 3 years for every single item of correspondence to be via email, but I still get a lot of phone calls.
But then you get this very senior person, Heidi Barlow, sending you emails. And I've watched her in action, and she's formidable. And she was operating at a senior level. She was general manager of the Canterbury business unit. So that must have felt like you were getting somewhere, right?
I saw her name. Obviously, I recognised her name. And I thought, OK, there's some changes being made at EQC. I had heard that there were being changes within the structure of EQC, and that maybe we were going to finally start moving forward. But my first correspondence from her was an email on the 16th April this year, and my last was on the 12th of June. And I emailed her a few times after that and never heard back, and I found out anecdotally that she'd left EQC.
So she's gone from EQC. She was operating at a very senior level and had kind of taken your case on, and she has simply left and you haven't been told that?
Correct. No one has officially told me that she has left.
So where does that leave you and your case now?
We have opened up discussions again with yet more people from EQC. It's very difficult to trust them this many years on. It feels like we have had Groundhog Day I don't know how many times. We've been told the same thing over and over and over by so many people that there's almost no reason to believe it this time. I'm really, really hoping. I mean, part of me, if you don't have hope, there's nothing to live for, is there? So part of me has to hang on to hope that this start of new negotiations is actually going to lead somewhere.
What's been the impact of this on you over the years since the earthquakes?
Oh, we've lost a lot of opportunities. There's no joy in our lives. I hate this house. I really do. I don't, if there was a stronger word than that, that's how I feel about it. I could turn my back on it, leave the key in the door. We've had so much taken from us that nothing can make up for it, for what we've lost. Nothing.
Anita, a homeowner, still in dispute with EQC, in part, only in part. Anita's issue is with the change in roll call of EQC case managers. She's had a dozen, maybe more. But then she was put under higher control under Heidi Barlow, General Manager of the Canterbury Business Unit, who seemed to be troubleshooting and working with case managers to supervise the process, and then she simply disappeared. I asked EQC CEO Sid Miller where she went.
So Heidi has left us, but what happened sort of round about the end of June, my Chief Customer Officer resigned, and what we did was we put in place an interim structure at that time, and that gave me the opportunity really at that time to have a much closer look in terms of the organisation and how do we enhance performance around the Canterbury Business Unit, delivering on claims, and also around preparing event readiness for the future. And key to that was actually looking how do we make sure that we integrate the delivery of all the independent ministerial recommendations and work coming out of the ministerial task force to bring that all together to deliver the best possible customer experience really coming out of that. And so what I did was I then created a new structure basically, which I consulted on about a month ago. And then coming out of that, I've created 2 new roles, and one's a Deputy Chief Executive, Canterbury and External Affairs, and another one's Deputy Chief Executive Operations. So there was basically, I then ended up with 2 roles and 3 people. And from that, Heidi, who was part of the whole consultation and very much supported the structure, though decided not to declare an expression of interest in one of those roles, recognising that actually, some of the challenge going ahead around, particularly around some of the communication side, was going to be require some sort of new leadership, if you like, in terms of that space. And so she decided to leave at that point.
Right, yet more changes. And there were people who had come under Heidi's wing, as it were. And what we are seeing, I guess, is a continuation of the fact there is no constancy, there is no singularity. You go from case manager to case manager, you go from EQC contact to EQC contact, and that's completely at odds with what the Minister told us when she appeared on Checkpoint in June. Now, I just want to play you the grab. It's about 8 seconds, but here's what she said she was after.
So one of the things that I've done since I've become Minister is ask for a claims management process to be put in place so people aren't pushed from pillar to post.
And people have been pushed from pillar to post, aren't they? They're still being pushed from pillar to post. Constantly new pillars, constantly new posts.
Well, if I could just cover a couple of things there, John. I mean, first of all, Heidi was the General Manager of the Canterbury Business Unit, so wasn't a case manager. In terms of case managers themselves, then what we said was we would ensure that everybody does have a case manager, which is what we've done. We've actually doubled the amount of settlement specialists that we've got in place, up to 39, and our claims resolution, in terms of the number of claims we're settling per month, has gone up from sort of 500 to around about 800 a month now. So we've made a lot of progress in that space. There's still claims there, and we've still got to work through those. So we've very much ensured that actually we have done what we said we were going to do. Yes, there has been some change, and there will continue to be changes. We've got to keep adapting. We've got to deliver against the IMAT recommendations, and we've got to. We're also looking at things like where we've got new claims coming in. What processes improvements can we make to actually resolve those claims quicker?
Can we talk about?
Sorry, adapting to change.
Absolutely. Can we talk about the new claims coming in? Are they re-repairs?
We've got a mix. We've got about 50% are just requests for information, and then some of those will be reopened claims.
Okay, and so when we last got a re-repairs tally, I think it was at the beginning of April, it was $270 million. What is it now?
I don't have a figure in terms of what the actual the current sort of valuation is for those re-repairs.
Has it gone up from $270 million?
where we're currently going through the process of doing our valuation, where we'll look at all the parameters in terms of what is the inflow of claims and what does that look like in terms of the valuation that's coming out of the other end.
I'm so delighted to have you on Checkpoint, but I don't know what you were saying there. Can I just ask you a very simple question? Have the values of re-repairs gone up from the figure of $270 million that we were given at the beginning of April?
So as we've talked about before, in terms of we do an ILVR evaluation on a 6-month basis. We've done that at the minute. That is going through our process with our board and audit and risk committee. And once it's gone through that, then we will then provide that information to the Treasury and to the Minister at that point.
Is it your expectation it will have gone up from $270 million?
There's always variation, John, because it's not just that re-repairs. It covers a whole range of things, and it varies all the time. It varies every 6 months. Some things go up and some things go down. So yes, there will be variation. Okay, can we talk about the number of homes where EQC did not properly assess or fix the damage to rubble foundations? Now, I know you will remember how many times I've asked you for the number of those homes on Checkpoint, and you've never been able to give us a figure, and you've told us Treasury are off looking at it. There's been all sorts of estimates. Can you give us the figure now? How many homes do you think will either have had damage that was missed or damage that was inadequately repaired? No, I can't give you those figures.
Why not?
Because I don't have them.
I'm incredulous you don't have them. I've been asking you for them over a period of many months. And this is absolutely material to where EQC stands. It's absolutely material because these are homes and lives and claimants you're dealing with, and because the government and the taxpayer is going to have to fund the repair work.
And that's why we are still having claims being reopened, and we'll continue to deal with those claims as they come in and address those. But I'm talking about estimates. I'm talking about no.
Last time we spoke, and I'm sorry, it's been a while since we spoke, and it's good to have a catch up. And I don't want to sound as if I am hard to satisfy, but I need a simple ballpark estimate from you because we've never had one. How many foundations were inadequately repaired or had damage that were missed? Ballpark.
I do not know, John. I do not know how many foundations are out there. So I cannot give you that figure. What I can say is that where people find things and they come back to us and they reopen that claim, and we will go through the whole settlement process and deal with the problem that they are facing. But I cannot give you a figure as to how many are out there.
Are Treasury working on estimates?
Well, they will work with our valuation report, which is an estimate.
And what's your valuation report estimate say?
Well, that's what we're working through at the minute. And once that is resolved and that's gone through the required processes, then we will share that.
So when will that be?
I think that'll be probably another 2 or 3 weeks.
So in 2 or 3 weeks' time, you will have an estimate of the number of homes in Christchurch who either had their foundations poorly repaired or damage in their foundations missed completely?
No, we will have an estimate based on the information we know as to what we think the liability could be in terms of going forward with the problems of foundation reopen repairs, sort of the legal cases. Everything is part of that valuation report. So what we will know at that time is what we think our latest valuation is.
When you say latest, when will you say latest? What was the previous?
Well, you just use the figure in terms of the reopened repairs.
So $270 million on the 5th of April, but they aren't only foundations, are they?
Well, that can be everything, yeah. Because obviously repairs come back to us. They could be foundation, they could be, or they could be, a crack in a wall or something like that. It's a whole range.
Absolutely,
of things
absolutely. Can I? You're meant to be the new broom, aren't you? Aren't you the replacement to the obfuscation, the prevarication and the non-answering we used to get? Aren't you the guy who was meant to answer the questions? Aren't you the guy who was meant to know this stuff? Aren't you the guy who was meant to be putting this stuff right? I mean, what are you doing there? I mean, how long have you been CEO of EQC for and you still can't answer really important questions?
John, nobody can answer that question because nobody knows exactly what is out there in terms of the problems you're talking about. The work that I have done quite extensively, particularly over the last year, is look at how we can improve the way that we settle claims. And I think we've done a lot of work with that, and we've settled around about sort of 1,500 of the 3,617 that we last talked about in May. So that's sort of around 35%, and we're making good progress on those claims that have been around with us the longest, and we'll continue to do that. We're also putting in place around where we're getting reopened claims, faster track processes, so we can turn those claims around a lot quicker, and they're the claims that have come in since May.
When do you think, in good faith, you will be able to tell the Minister, and the Minister will be able to tell the people of New Zealand, and more importantly the people of Christchurch, what the total value, ballpark, and we're talking estimate here, of the damage beneath the floors of that city is? Either that was missed entirely in the first instance or that has been inadequately repaired.
I couldn't sit here and give you a figure on that today, John.
Sid Miller, who is the CEO of EQC. You are with Checkpoint. So much feedback coming in on feedlots, and you don't like them. We'll have some of it coming up. Nona next with business, but before it all, Susanna, I'm sorry it's so late. Headlines time.
The MP salaries and allowances of MPs will be frozen for a year once the government passes urgent legislation to head off the Remuneration Authority's annual increase. The Remuneration Authority recently recommended a 3% increase, but the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says that is not acceptable. She says the government is focused on lifting the incomes of lower and middle income earners and reducing the gap between them and those on high salaries. A Fijian woman accused of helping to traffic workers to New Zealand in 2014 will appear at the High Court in Suva next month. FBC News reports the 31-year-old was charged with 11 counts of obtaining property by deception and 1 of money laundering. She's been remanded in custody in Suva, and an arrest warrant is expected to be filed for her sister, who lives in Australia. The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters says putting more money into prevention, which means more police on the street, will drop the crime rate. The police say the 1,800 additional officers agreed to as part of the coalition agreement between New Zealand First and Labour will be spread around the country. A hospital doctor found to have given inadequate care to a woman injured in a car crash will undergo a performance assessment. The doctor believed the 18-year-old, who later died from multiple brain injuries, was drunk, but a blood test for the police found no alcohol in her system. The Health and Disability Commissioner's report found the woman was given inadequate care by those involved, including 2 nurses whose competence may be reviewed. The principal of a South Auckland high school says a digital-only practice exam won't disadvantage students. The Botany Downs Secondary College is part of a trial of digital exams for NCEA Level 1 Science. But a student petition says not every student can afford to buy a new laptop. The principal, Karen Brinsden, says being involved in the pilot helps the school to gauge what has to be done when digital exams become the norm. And she says the school has some devices for loan. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with the news at 6.
She's only minutes away. My apologies. Thanks, Susanna. Nona Peltzer on the other side of me with business news. Hi, Nona. I'm fascinated by this. Someone saying New Zealand is more likely than not to benefit from a trade war between China and the US, at least in the short term. Who is saying this, and why are they saying it?
Now, this is a really interesting woman from the United States. She's the chief economist for the global ratings agency S&P for the United States markets. That's all she concerns herself with. That's a huge job. And I was looking through some of her work. She gave me quite a lot to read through. And I was impressed. I mean, this is a person who's really looked at the inside out of where things are at in the United States economy. And what she's saying is that at the moment, the U.S. economy is booming along. The dollar is very high, and that is a direct benefit to New Zealand because U.S. consumers have more money in their pocket than they've had for a while, and their dollar is stronger, so they can buy more export-type products, tariffs or no tariffs. They're spending more on consumer items, and they're going on holidays, trips to places like New Zealand. And because New Zealand has been very active in doing bilateral trade agreements and, of course, the Trans-Pacific Agreement and so on, this is very positive for New Zealand at a time where the United States is stepping back. So in the short term, good news for New Zealand because there's lots of opportunity, and although it may disrupt supply chain, employment, and other things around the world, it's going to have very little impact on the U.S. economy for quite a while. It will only start to have an impact if it becomes a very deep-seated thing, and there's no sense right now that that's going to happen.
You spoke to her, right?
Yeah.
And you've got a grab from her.
I do, yes. And she. Well,
What's her name?
Her name is Beth Ann Bovina.
Right.
Let's have a little bit of what she had to say.
New Zealand will benefit from the stronger dollar. In terms of how that's handled, in terms of offering incentives to encourage money to be spent in New Zealand as opposed to possibly its trading partners. Now that also goes into the worry, of course, then you could have a tit for tat with its trading partners. So there's a worry there. I would suspect at this point in time, what we're starting to see is other countries start to make an agreement in terms of trade agreements. That's a positive. The U.S., the worry, of course, we're still the biggest economy, and we can't be ignored. But if the farther we stay behind, the farther the U.S. stays out of these agreements, eventually it's going to hurt us. And those countries like New Zealand could move ahead without us.
S&P's Beth Ann Bovina, fascinating, don't it? Investor confidence and another survey.
I'm sorry to say it is another survey. I'll take my papers back here. That's right, John.
Take your survey.
Yes, well, it's actually fallen to a 2-year low, but that's still not as low as it has been. It is a 2-year low, but we've seen investor confidence slump even more.
And in part, that will be about interest rates, right?
It's always about interest rates.
Right.
Because New Zealand investors favor term deposits over almost every other kind of investment other than property. And both those types of investments have been sluggish over the last short while. And that means that their returns are not so great. And so a net 16% of them believe that their investments will improve over the next couple of years, whereas 21% thought so before, and that's not going to happen with term deposits. That money is pretty much fixed. The Reserve Bank has signaled that, so it's likely to even be worse than that. So we can expect confidence to fall further. What's really interesting is the ASB said that even though, why it is that New Zealand is fixed with term deposits when really our markets have been booming ahead. And today, for example, our market...
Yeah, what's the NZSX?
We're at a record high. Today we're at let's see, we closed up 56 points at 91.09. Now
I remember not long ago you saying we were about to cross 8,000.
Well,
it doesn't seem that many months ago.
Well, actually, just about, we have increased since in the past year 15.7% return on the market if you were investing in the top 50, and you compare that with a term deposit of say 3.5%. That's not that much. House prices too are sluggish at the moment. So look, if you wanted to make hay in the sun, you'd be wanting to put your money in the market. Well, you would have wanted to, and so we're at a record high, and the New Zealand dollar, which is interesting. Okay, we have firmed up a little bit. We talked about earlier just about S&P and talking about the high U.S. dollar. That's come down a little bit, where trade talks look like they might be coming to more discussion between the U.S. and China. We'll see what happens with that. We're at 66.2 U.S. cents, 90.6 Australian, and 52 pence.
Nona Peltz, nice to have you back, Nona. Thanks very much indeed. After more than a week of the worst monsoon flooding in a century, more heavy rain is still expected in the southern Indian state of Kerala. More than 350 people have died so far. More bodies are being discovered. Many lost their lives in landslides. The flooding has also left 300,000 people homeless. This report from the BBC.
The help they were waiting for has finally arrived. This baby was rescued from the southern district of Alappuzha. The boy's mother had been airlifted just before him. They're among hundreds of thousands who have had to leave their homes. Finding shelter at schools turned into relief centres. There are nearly 4,000 people here. Aid is being sent by the government, but they're also receiving supplies from people wanting to help. Instead of running the school he normally heads, Father Joe is now managing this centre.
Flood is more than our imagination, you know, and water coming from the all over. It's within no time. They have no time to even respond. So they have no place to go anywhere. They leave everything and they came. And we have to suddenly open these camps right now.
Saralamba was visiting her sister when the flooding started. She was rescued by locals in a small fishing boat.
I thought I was going to die. Even the boat I was rescued in almost capsized. My sister and I fell out of it, but somehow they were able to hold on to us.
Not everyone was able to escape. Heavy rainfall caused a mudslide which destroyed this house. 9 people died here. Among them were Abdul Aziz's wife and brother. He works in Dubai and came here a day after the tragedy.
My wife was my partner of 30 years, and now she's left me. My brother is gone, and his children too. I just can't bear it.
Neighbours and relatives gathered together, offering prayers for the dead. Outside, the rain has stopped for the first time since the 8th of August.
This road was flooded earlier, but because it hasn't rained in the past 12 hours or so, the water levels have receded a bit and cars can pass through it again. And it's made the work of people like those who are in these lorries behind me, Indian Navy personnel and rescuers. It's made their life easier.
Uprooted trees and rocks had also blocked roads. Troops have been clearing them. Bridges that were broken are being repaired so that relief material can get to even the most remote areas of the state. No rains are expected for the next few days. But even now, large parts of Kerala are underwater. It'll be a while before people get to go home.
The BBC's Yogita Limai. It is coming up to 13 minutes to 6. The man in charge of Silberhorn took the stand today as the disputed facts hearing involving the company's Deer Velvet pills entered its 6th day. The company, now known as Gateway Solutions Limited, has admitted 26 charges under the Fair Trading Act related to diluting its Deer Velvet with carob between 2011 and 2015. The firm and its sole director, Ian Carline, also pleaded guilty to 1 count of withholding information from the Commerce Commission. What's disputed is intent. Our Otago Southland reporter, Timothy Brown, was in court to hear Mr Carline's evidence.
The Deer Velvet pills were labelled as containing 250 milligrams. In fact, they contained substantially less. So did Silberhorn mean to mislead the public with its labelling, or was it an oversight? Ian Carline says his product was a higher quality, a concentrate if you like. So technically the company misled, but it didn't intend to. And when Judge Kevin Phillips asked him what he based this analysis on, here's what he said.
Can we have an answer to your question? Upon what basis was the assessment done?
It's the effectiveness on myself, sir, as a guinea pig.
The increased potency came after a change to the drying process, a process which is suppressed due to commercial sensitivity. Mr Carline says high doses of Deer Velvet can cause nosebleeds. He used this to draw his conclusions, not scientific investigation.
Throughout my involvement with Silberhorn, I have used myself and others as guinea pigs. And so Sir Colin Meads would try the product, I'd get his opinion, and then I would be the first one to try the product, and that's when I had the reality moment with the nosebleeds.
During cross-examination, the Commission's lawyer, John Dixon QC, slammed the process.
I'm going to suggest to you it was woefully inadequate. Do you accept that?
No.
And it was unscientific.
I would disagree with that.
The key revelation came when Mr Carline conceded to Mr Dixon that the product contained less Deer Velvet than the labels indicated.
If you could just answer the question of, were you aware?
I was aware, yes.
And you gave that instruction knowing that the label specified something different, something more.
Yeah, that is correct.
Mr Carline says the change to the drying process had made the Deer Velvet twice as effective as before, hence why less was needed. It was revealed last week that Colin Lee, a business associate, made the initial complaint to the Commission. Today, Mr Carline accused Mr Lee of stealing deer velvet from him and going to the Commission to settle the score for legal action taken against him. The court heard how Mr Carline became aware of the Commerce Commission's investigation into the product in 2014, as all black great and deer velvet user Sir Colin Meads received phone calls alerting him. In May of that year, Mr Carline received a phone call from Commission investigator Wedemu Lowry.
Well, the nature of the call was entrapment, so it was clearly being recorded.
You say it was entrapment?
Just the nature of the questions. He was talking about carob and how we were somehow representing carob as deer velvet, which just wasn't correct.
Evidence is expected to conclude on Wednesday, followed by legal arguments. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
A British woman spent more than 10 hours in the Adriatic Sea after falling from a cruise liner off the Croatian coast. She's now receiving treatment from her ordeal. And she says she feels very lucky to be alive. 10 hours at sea. The BBC's Tom Burridge reports.
She fell from a cruise ship late at night and then spent 10 hours on her own at sea. But Kay looked well on this, the final leg of her rescue by Croatia's Coast Guard. One very grateful holidaymaker back on dry land. This is the moment she was rescued.
I fell off the back of the Norwegian Star. Okay. And I was in the water for 10 hours. Okay. So these wonderful guys rescued me.
She fell from the back deck of this 92,000-ton cruise ship, the Norwegian Star. The ship had docked at the Croatian port of Dubrovnik and was heading north towards Venice when, just before midnight on Saturday, Kay went overboard, about 60 miles off the Croatian coast. Too much sun, the only visible effect, but what an ordeal.
I am very lucky to be alive.
There's been no comment on how she fell. Croatia's Coast Guard said she was exhausted when they pulled her from the water.
The BBC's Tom Burridge, so much feedback coming in on feedlots. You are overwhelmingly against them. Hi, John Reef, feedlots, such a disgusting way to raise animals. This is corporate greed at its best. What an awful ending for those animals. This must be stopped. Says one listener, hi, John, an emphatic no to feedlots here in New Zealand. It looks barbaric, especially with no shelter. Stick those animals out there for 24 hours. Sorry, stick those farmers out there for 24 hours and see how they fare. That's feedlots EQC. When EQC gets some figures, they will have a meeting, waffle on, think about some buzzwords, refuse to tell anyone what's happening, make claimants the problem and hope you will go away. How can they stay? They still don't know what they're doing. Sack them for incompetence. I hope the rest of the country is listening hard. Watch out, New Zealand, because you could well be dealing with EQC earthquake circus. We all pay for this ineptitude and keep on paying taxes and health, both mental and physical. Surely these guys can come up with a spreadsheet. No systems. What a surprise, says Justine. And this person says, I have a letter sent to EQC demanding our claim be deemed over cap. SR says full foundation replacement required. That's Southern response. EQC won't even reply. Can't get a name, let alone a case manager. So freaking angry. Thank you for all of your feedback. Nearly 6 months on from a major earthquake in Papua New Guinea's Highlands region, affected communities remain in desperate need of help. February's magnitude 7.5 quake in Hela province killed at least 180 people and caused widespread damage in a region which has also recently been mired in violent unrest, of course. RNZ Pacific's Johnny Blades and Karoy Hawkins travelled to the remote Highlands region and they filed this report.
Chemicals, fuel spills, bark, dust. If it's on the ground, it could end up in Tauranga Harbour when it rains at the city's port.
We've got the wrong package here. That's a package from Zach that we're going to have later in the program. This is the package from Johnny Blades and Karoy Hawkins in PNG.
And it was like ordinary day. On Sunday, we just played, we do what we normally do. And after dinner, we had family prayer and we went to bed.
Geraldine Lepi, a student from Papua New Guinea's Southern Highlands province, recounting the night of February 26th when a magnitude 7.5 earthquake struck in her region. For people unused to earthquakes, it created terror, confusion and fear.
Yeah, everyone was screaming and they came out from their houses. And we heard some voice, they said like move out from your houses and come out, like where the big space are. So we had to come up here.
Many remote villages were devastated, sending communities fleeing from their homes. Yolanda was one such village. Its representative is Richard Don.
So we fear that another tremor or another shock may have happened in the future. Therefore, I have to move my people to other locations where more flatter, more good place for them to resettle themselves.
There were many significant aftershocks and landslides. Some villages wiped out. Thousands of displaced people converged in numerous care centres across several provinces. Many Southern Highlanders found relief with the Catholic diocese in Mendi under the watch of Bishop Don Lippert.
Thousands of people were affected in one way or another. Many were killed. We know some people who were killed here, not far from here, mainly by landslides that were provoked by the earthquake. And many had their gardens damaged, their small homes destroyed. We ourselves and others, the government as well, suffered great catastrophic damage to infrastructure as schools and healthcare centres, of course churches and some mission buildings as well.
Mendi, the capital of Southern Highlands province, is in danger of becoming a ghost town. People here are resilient and could withstand the earthquake disaster, but after a mob went on a rampage over what they saw as a rigged election, destroying a commercial airplane, the local courthouses and the governor's residence, it seems people have had enough of political violence and are starting to move out.
There's a bigger attitude problem.
Joseph Noah is one of a declining number of teachers still willing to come to Mendi to work.
With people, and then they go for fight only. When there is a small problem happens, they go for fight only.
In neighbouring Hela province, where the quake's epicentre was located, tribal fighting with high-powered weapons caused dozens of deaths in recent months, prompting an extra deployment of PNG's Defence Force. Nearly 6 months on from the big quake, Hela's Provincial Deputy Administrator Eddie Yui says despite the unrest they're battling on, distributing food rations and caring for displaced people.
So gradually, slowly, we can have the real life of the people sustainable again. So in order to do so, we need to help them rebuild their properties, because as we speak now, the mothers and kids, the people who've been in there, they have the fear, the scare, the trauma is still with them. So we're going to help them rebuild.
We've just choppered into the mountaintop village of Yolanda, which was rather devastated by February's big earthquake here in Southern Highlands province. And there are a number of houses which have been destroyed, some partly collapsed and some are just teetering off the hillside. But people here have decided that they have to move from this village where they've been for many years and go somewhere more stable, more flat, for fear that another major earthquake may come and totally wipe out this place.
At the moment, we're very, very hard and very, really hard to live. We already run out of food. We made a garden, but then cannot be harvested within a month or 2 or 3 or 4 months. It may take another while to harvest that food. So at the moment, we are very hungry now, and most of the people are really suffering.
The aftershocks are settling down, but the head of PNG's Earthquake Disaster Response Team, Bill Hamblin, says the recovery and rebuilding challenge remains huge.
PNG's had numerous natural disasters before. We've had earthquakes, we've had volcanic eruptions, etc., etc. But this is the first time that we've had a disaster that's been spread over 5 different provinces, and it's had differing effects in each one of those provinces. So when you look at the earthquake, you can't just have one sort of solution that you put out there in all 5 provinces. It's quite different.
The affected Highlands communities are resilient. Many have now returned to their villages to get on with re-establishing their communities.
I myself am a bit, I can say, frustrated, I suppose, that I was in Moresby recently and I saw them rebuilding perfectly good roads, spending millions and millions of kina on rebuilding perfectly good roads for this APEC meeting that's coming up, when not one toya has been given to the diocese, for example, and other churches to rebuild schools, churches, classrooms, health care centers, staff housing, and nothing has been given, as far as I know, for any rebuilding.
The upheavals of 2018 in this Highlands region ensure a lasting trauma. For the more remote affected communities, help can't come soon enough. Amid lingering fears of another disaster, the future remains very uncertain.
Uncertain future, uncertain region. That's RNZ Pacific's Johnny Blades and Karoi Hawkins reporting for us. Just before we go to the news at 6 with Susanna, a tornado, it seems, or some very extraordinary wind event has hit several houses in New Plymouth. Police and fire crews are in attendance. The city has been struck by lightning, thunder and heavy rain for most of the afternoon. Power has been cut off to parts of the city. We're making calls on this and we'll have more for you after 6. If you are there and you have experienced it, do text us if the cell phone towers are working, 2101, and we'll give you a call back. But it does look like a tornado or something similar to it has smashed into parts of Taranaki around New Plymouth. All of that and more, we hope, after the news at 6 with Susanna.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening, I'm Susanna Leatawa. MP salaries and allowances will be frozen for the coming year. The Remuneration Authority recently recommended a 3% increase, which the Prime Minister says is not acceptable. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Urgent legislation will have to be passed in order for the freeze to take effect before the Remuneration Authority's increase comes into force in late September. Last year, MPs all received a pay rise of about 2.5%. The authority is required to make a recommended pay increase in line with rises across the public service. Jacinda Ardern has asked for the funding formula to be reassessed to ensure it's fair and in keeping with her government's expectations and values. She insists the changes are not related to MPs' expenses, which were released last week, saying the discussion was underway before that. Atu te whare Pārimata ko Chris Bramwell aho.
A woman has been remanded in custody in Fiji in relation to trafficking workers to New Zealand. The 31-year-old was arrested in Suva on Thursday and she's to reappear at the High Court in Suva next month. FBC News reports that she was charged with 11 counts of obtaining property by deception and 1 count of money laundering. Her sister, who lives in Australia, has been charged in absentia and an arrest warrant is expected to be filed. The pair are alleged to have helped in the trafficking of 17 victims in 2014. They are accused of receiving money from Faroz Ali, who was convicted in 2016 of human trafficking offences. The hospital doctor of a woman who died from multiple brain injuries believed she was dealing with someone who was drunk. A report by the Health and Disability Commissioner found the woman was given inadequate care by those involved. Ben Strang reports.
When the 18-year-old was admitted to hospital, a witness quoted the doctor as saying staff were not here to babysit drunks. A nurse who assessed the woman didn't make any neurological observations and the doctor stated she had no obvious head injury. It was only when police requested a blood test that it was discovered she didn't have any alcohol in her system. The Health and Disability Commissioner says the nurses, the doctor and the paramedics involved were in breach of their duties. The doctor will undergo a performance assessment and there may be a review into the competence of the nurses. The St John Ambulance Service and Ngāti Porou Hawara Charitable Trust have been referred to the Director of Proceedings to decide if any further action should be taken. Ko Ben Strang tēnei.
A South Auckland high school principal says students won't be disadvantaged by the trial of a digital-only exam. A student from Botany Downs Secondary College started up a petition about a practice digital-only exam for NCEA Level 1 Science. The petition says students won't have access to charging ports or school laptops, and not every student can afford to buy a new laptop. The principal, Karen Brinsden, says the digital-only exam is still at the trial stage.
NZQA have a goal of having the majority of their subject-based assessments online by 2020. By us being involved in either their pilots or the trials, we get a gauge of what has to be done.
Ms Brinsden says the school does have a number of devices for loan. The Commerce Commission's lawyer says Silberhorn's test to determine the potency, seeing whether it gives you a bleeding nose, is unscientific. The company diluted its Deer Velvet with carob, a cocoa substitute, between 2011 and 2015. Its sole director, Ian Carline, has testified before a disputed facts hearing into charges laid against the Fair Trading Act. Mr Carline said after a change in the manufacturing process, the Deer Velvet was twice as good as before. He told the District Court in Dunedin that he knew this because it gave him nosebleeds. The Commission's lawyer, John Dixon QC, criticised that thinking.
I'm going to suggest to you, Mr Carline, that what you did to test your new process was woefully inadequate and utterly unscientific.
No.
Evidence in the case is expected to conclude on Wednesday. The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Winston Peters, has been made aware of the resignation of Antarctica New Zealand's chief executive. RNZ News has been unable to confirm when Peter Beggs resigned from the government agency, but other media are reporting he handed in his notice on Thursday. He has since been replaced by the acting chief executive, Peter Smith. Mr Peters says he is unable to comment further as it's an operational matter. The board's chair, Sir Brian Roach, says they plan to recruit a new chief executive as soon as possible. Antarctica New Zealand hasn't responded to the questions about why Mr Beggs departed so suddenly. It's 6:05. The All Blacks are vowing to be better in this week's second Bledisloe Cup test in Auckland. Steve Hanson's side put one hand back on the prized trophy with a commanding 38-13 win in the first test against the Wallabies in Sydney on Saturday. But fullback Ben Smith says Australia aren't the only team with a lot of improvement left in them.
We're aware that they would have learnt a lot from the weekend, but I think so have we. We've learnt, in the review today that we've missed quite a few opportunities, and so I think it's pretty exciting this week that we can fix up quite a lot of those, and I'm sure they'll go away and do the same thing, so that's what makes this second test so interesting.
Ben Smith. Hockey New Zealand will conduct an independent review into the culture of the national women's team after a meeting with the Players Association this morning. The review follows feedback from players in the wake of revelations that the Black Sticks coach, Mark Hager, accidentally sent an email to his squad criticising several of the team. And former world tennis number one Novak Djokovic has become the first player to win all 9 ATP Masters 1000 titles, with a straight sets win over Roger Federer in the final of the Cincinnati Open. The result ends Federer's streak of 7 wins from his many finals, and after a disrupted run, Djokovic is in awe of his achievement at what is the main lead-up tournament to the US Open.
I went through a little bit of a roller coaster ride in my career with injury and taking time off and having a surgery earlier this year. So this seems a bit unreal, to be honest, to be back at this level and winning Wimbledon and obviously Cincinnati for the first time.
Novak Djokovic, that's the news.
Tonight on Nights we've got Moonlander in the studio, so they can't have been faked. And Dana Johansson brings the sport. Who knows, we might even have a new national netball coach.
Do you have a separate space in your house, Dudley?
I have a studio space, yep.
Has it got a heater?
There's a heat pump in the hallway. I feel like I'm going to giving you a tell-all of my house. There's a heat pump in the hallway and I just wear lots of clothes.
That's Lately with Karen Hay, 10 p.m. weeknights on RNZ National.
News just in, emergency services are responding to reports of a tornado in New Plymouth. Reports say the tornado was in the Belt Road area. The police say there are so far no reports of injuries, but roofs may have been lifted from homes and power lines could be down. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For the whole of the North Island except Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, periods of rain, sometimes heavy with hail, possible thunderstorms, easing to a few showers tonight. Showers becoming more frequent later tomorrow morning, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered rain developing this afternoon, clearing overnight. Cloudy periods tomorrow, a few showers in the afternoon and evening, possibly heavy with hail. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, rain or showers at times, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms. Westland and Fiordland, showers, some heavy in Westland with possible thunderstorms north of Hokitika today. Canterbury, North Otago and Central Otago, mainly fine, isolated showers tomorrow. Dunedin, Clutha and Southland, scattered rain, clearing Southland this afternoon. Isolated showers tomorrow, but more widespread about coastal Southland and Stewart Island. And the Chatham Islands, showers, clearing this afternoon, rain developing overnight, easing to a few showers tomorrow afternoon. It's 8 minutes past 6. You're with Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Thanks so much, Susanna. I was wriggling beside you like a school kid on the mat, wasn't I? I apologise. Really nice to have you with us. You have a nice evening. Boy, feedback on feedlots. You don't like them. I can't recall the last time feedback was so one-sided. although we do get it from time to time, but yep, you are strongly opposed. Just outside of Ashburton, there is a farm that's just 800 metres long and 400 metres wide, which has consent to farm 19,000 cattle. It's an intensive American-style beef farm, a feedlot farm, and it's by far the biggest one in New Zealand. Cattle, after grazing grass for 6 months, are bunched together in grassless lots, for up to 8 more months while they're fattened up on maize, grains, etc. The farm's not new. It's been there since 1991. People in the region will know it, of course, but we're talking about it because in recent years more and more of its kind have started popping up or will pop up. And there are various animal welfare and environmental concerns about feedlot farming, along with your concerns. Animal welfare groups SAFE and Fish and Game are both calling for feedlots to be banned in New Zealand before they become prevalent. Here's SAFE's head of campaigns, Marion McDonald, followed by Fish and Game CEO Martin Taylor.
There's no grass. It's called a zero grazing system. And those animals are forced onto a grain diet for the months before they're slaughtered for beef. And that can cause a lot of welfare issues as well. The grain can cause bloating and diarrhoea in those animals.
One of the indictments on New Zealand is that we identify an issue, which is erosion and settlement, and then we just turn a blind eye to what's causing it. And one of the things that are causing it is feedlots. Intensive farming is not good for the country.
Fish and Game and SAFE talking to our reporter Zach Fleming. Well, what does Beef and Lamb New Zealand make of it? If you go to their website, they proudly talk about New Zealand beef and lamb being grass-fed. So Zach called Beef and Lamb New Zealand CEO Sam McIver and talked to him about the concerns around intensive beef farming.
Listen, all farmers, regardless of whether they're grass-fed farmers or grain-fed, they're required to meet central government and local government standards, so whether that's around animal welfare or environmental practice. And, you know, farmers expect of each other that farmers abide by those practices. So every system has got to meet the requirements.
And so it's just a case of, at the moment, meeting those requirements. There's, putting 19,000 cattle on a small patch of land compared to, say, putting 5,000 cattle on the same size patch of land, logic dictates that 19,000 cattle will pollute the waterways more. So if New Zealand can leverage our grass-fed image overseas and attract higher prices for what we're great at, because, we are great at putting cows on beautiful lush green land and farming this grass-fed beef. That's what we've always been good at. Is there a place for this? Do we need to be doing this in New Zealand, or should we perhaps leave grain-fed farming to the places where it's better known, like America and Japan? And
our predominant production system in New Zealand is grass-fed. I think it's over 98% of what we produce in New Zealand is grass-fed. We're considered to be the best grass-fed farmers in the world. In fact, farmers travel here from all sorts of places internationally to try and understand what we do and learn from us. We have a temperate climate, and it does suit that free-range outdoor production. So that certainly is our competitive advantage, and I would say today that competitive advantage is actually increasing because we're seeing consumer demand worldwide shifting towards a grass-fed product.
So would you like to see 100% of New Zealand's beef be grass-fed?
Well, at the moment we're 98%. We have some niche players who've identified, and ANZCO is a good example of a niche player who's identified a particular customer who's got specific requirements and willing to pay a premium for that. For us, it's all about putting the information in front of farmers, and the information we're putting in front of farmers at the moment is that there is a tremendous opportunity in grass-fed production out of New Zealand, and as an organisation, we're very, very excited about the opportunities that sit there for New Zealand grass-fed beef producers.
Beef and Lamb New Zealand CEO Sam McIver, and ANZCO, which owns the feedlot farm in Ashburton, wasn't available for an interview today, but said it adheres to the highest standards of animal welfare. Zach's story from earlier in the program is now online. Let's go to rugby. We've got some eyewitness reports coming in from Taranaki. Bridget Burke, our producer's just cutting them up, so they'll be next. But Ryan Crotty's teammates are taking a glass half full stance as calls ring out for the All Blacks midfielder to consider his future in rugby. For the 6th time in 15 months, Ryan Crotty finds himself recovering from concussion, the most talked about issue concerning our national game. The 29-year-old was knocked out in a nasty head clash during Saturday's first Bledisloe Cup test, completely accidental, ruling him out of at least this weekend's second test in Auckland, and how much longer no one knows. As Clay Wilson reports, a teammate of Crotty's, who's had his own battles with head injuries, is confident the right decisions will be made.
Well, he's concussed straight away. Look, you watch the eyes roll back there. Now, you can see there, yeah, I would be very, very surprised, and I mean this wholeheartedly, if Ryan Crotty returns to this game.
Ben Smith has had his fair share of run-ins with concussion. So while heartening, it seems hard to contemplate the Star All Blacks fullback's assessment of Ryan Crotty after the sickening blow he received during the early stages of last weekend's clash with the Wallabies in Sydney.
Obviously, yeah, we're good mates with Ryan, and I think, you know, he's actually, over the last couple of days, he seemed actually not too bad, like his symptoms and that weren't bad.
That doesn't mean Smith and the rest of Crotty's All Blacks teammates aren't urging him not to rush his recovery. After flanker Sam Cane yesterday admitted there was still so much unknown with concussion, with every chance your next head knock could spell the end of your career, Smith says his advice to Crotty is simple.
I think you just got to take it as it comes, and yeah, that's why the protocol's there, so you can follow it, and I'm sure it'll take that time and he'll be back when he's ready, yeah.
The ever-increasing focus on concussion has led to a clampdown from World Rugby, with an almost zero-tolerance policy being adopted on contact involving the head. All Blacks halfback Aaron Smith agrees it's never nice seeing a teammate and friend take a big blow, but says the players understand what can happen.
We're really close with Ryan, and so you hate to see that kind of stuff happen, but like as we said, we all play this game with the risk of something happening.
The risk for Crotty, of course, is coming back too soon. Or as some believe, after so many concussions in such a short space of time, coming back at all. But having successfully returned from head injuries on several occasions, Smith is confident Crotty and those assisting his recovery will make the right calls.
It just goes on symptoms really, and how he's tracking, so yeah, I'm sure that the medical team will do the appropriate protocols and he'll be back when he's feeling back to 100.
The All Blacks team for Saturday's second Bledisloe Cup test will be named on Thursday, with Anton Leonard-Brown expected to replace Crotty in the starting lineup and Sonny Bill Williams expected to return for the following match. Moti Hotaka, Otia Hipone, ko Clay Wilson aho.
Thanks, Clay. We're getting reports from Taranaki. It sounds like this tornado's gone pretty well into downtown New Plymouth. French Street and St Albans Road, roofs off, garage walls off, says Lawrence. Thank you, Lawrence. Bridget Burke is talking to witnesses. We'll have that in a sec. The government has granted an Auckland recycling company more than $3 million to build a new waste plant that will double its recycling capacity. Green Gorilla will get the money through the Waste Minimisation Fund, which channels landfill levies to businesses trying to reduce waste. We sent our reporter Annika Smith to Green Gorilla this morning to see what impact a new waste plant will have.
That's the sound of some of the 163,000 tonnes of waste processed at Green Gorilla's Onehunga facility each year. About 60% of it is sent to landfill and 30 to 40% recycled or reused, but that's set to change, partly in thanks to a $3 million government grant. Ray Harris, one of the firm's owners, says the grant will help the company build a new plant and in turn reduce the amount of waste sent to landfill by about 30%.
It's key to our industry here really, and you know, we're trying to be on the front foot and really make it work and divert from landfill, and we've been very, very successful with that at the present time. So once we get the new sort line, we're going to, you know, be producing even more and more recyclables from diversion from landfills.
The Associate Minister for the Environment, Eugenie Sage, announced the funding at Green Gorilla's processing facility this morning. It comes on the back of the Greens announcing plans to crack down on the amount of waste New Zealand produces at its annual AGM in Palmerston North at the weekend. Ms Sage says 85% of waste going to landfill in Auckland is construction and demolition waste. This waste will be the focus of the new processing plant and significantly dent the amount going straight to landfill.
It's the area where
we haven't really grappled with, and it's also in terms of expanding the waste levy will mean that it's more economic for businesses like this to divert materials, because sometimes it would be cheaper to go to landfill with the low dumping levy.
Miss Sage says the Waste Minimisation Fund ensures both waste and landfill levies are recycled.
It's a recycling of revenue from the landfill levy to enable progressive businesses to expand their operations to divert more material from landfill. So it's a really good recycling of revenue.
Graham Balkett, another Green Gorilla owner, says the new plant doesn't come without a cost to the firm. He says the total investment in the new plant is more than $8 million, but the price is worth it.
We are about separating as much waste as possible and diverting it from landfill. That's our mission statement, and so to achieve that, we've got to put resources in place to do that.
Mr Balkett says the waste landscape is changing and other businesses are sure to follow their lead.
Sooner or later there'll be greater levies, costs will go up for consumers and for businesses, and at that time we should be able to retain the profits that we need with this sort of plant.
Green Gorilla's new plant is already under construction and is expected to be operational early next year. I Tamaki Makoto mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Annika Smith aho.
In developing news, a tornado has hit several houses in New Plymouth. Lightning, thunder and heavy rain have struck the city for much of the afternoon. Power has been cut to parts of it. A short time ago, our producer Bridget Burke spoke to Tom from Harab Deakin Motors, and homeowner Daisy Symes was watching TV when her roof lifted off.
We've just got here and there's Belt Road corner, and there's the next door neighbour's roof's gone. There's cops here and just stop the road. Hold it, I'm just coming through. And then it's come through right beside us. By the looks of it, all our car yard's good, and it's gone down Belt Road. The road's closed here, down Belt Road, and the next door neighbour's house is gone. The flats, 50 metres are fine by the looks of it. Yeah, very narrow little tornado by the looks of it. It looks like it's come very narrowly down Belt Road and just nailed it from there. I'm just walking down the road now. How many other places? Hold it, I'll just have a look. Yeah, just seems to be like really two or three houses just right on the top of Belt Road have been hammered. Yeah.
When you say hammered, what do you mean? What are you seeing?
Well, the roofs are off. That's all. Not too major at all, really. But I guess it's a tornado. Yeah. Oh, hold it. Is there more down there? Yeah, that guy's roof's off. Oh, yeah. And also, yes, further down, all the fences have been... Oh, there's another house here that's quite major, actually. It's actually come down into the dip and ripped that house's roof off, its half roof off, yep. How much further? It's gone down about 100, 200 metres down Belt Road. In fact, I'm looking up at a house and all the bats are all blown all over down the side here. The fences have all blown down. If you want, there's a couple. There's a couple just standing outside.
Put them on, please.
Okay.
Thanks, mate.
Hold it.
Hello. Oh, hi there. Look, it's Bridget for John Campbell's Radio New Zealand Checkpoint. I'm so sorry to bother you at this time. Can you tell me what's happened?
Well, basically, I was just sitting in my kitchen. I was writing my journal, and there was thunder and lightning, and then the wind picked up, and all of a sudden the house started shaking underneath us. So I ran into my lounge to get my nephew and huddled him under me, and the roof went off, and we were watching trees going, and it was pretty terrifying.
What do you mean the roof went off? Did the whole thing just lift up?
Yeah, I saw the roof lift, and there's a giant hole in our lounge, so I was watching the tornado pass over. I slipped over in amongst it, but he's fine.
And so what are you going to do now this evening? It's raining still there now in New Plymouth. What are you going to do now?
Well, my partner, he works in Kaponga. He's coming back to New Plymouth and picking me up, and we're going to stay with his mum out in Manaia for the night and sort things out after that.
And no one's hurt that you know of around the neighbourhood?
No one that I know of. The street all came out and everyone's pretty gutted and upset and shook up.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of damage down here, really, when you look around. But the guy that's actually behind our car yard is actually, he's the worst off. I think the whole bloody roof's gone, actually. Yeah.
That's Tom from Harabdika Motors, and before that Daisy Symes, who's a homeowner, talking to Bridget Burke. So very localised, but quite nasty if it hit you. 6:24. After months of waiting and uncertainty, Kapiti Coast locals can finally fly to Auckland again. The region lost the flights when Air New Zealand packed up and abandoned the route in April. Now Air Chathamson stepped in with its inaugural flight, taking off from the tarmac at 6:45 this morning. Our reporter Katie Doyle was at the airport when it all happened, and she filed this report for us.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Air Chathamson would now like to welcome passengers on our inaugural Flight 641, direct service to Auckland, and we invite you to board your aircraft now through the departure gate.
Passengers and locals gathered at Kapiti Airport this morning to commemorate the region's first flight to Auckland in months. The new service provider, Air Chathams, will run 6 flights between Paraparaumu and Auckland each weekday, and 3 on Saturdays and Sundays. The flights have been welcomed by Kapiti coasters who say they're tired of the hour-long commute to Wellington Airport, which they've been doing ever since Air New Zealand deserted the route. Gary Lawn, who was on the inaugural flight to Auckland this morning, says he's over the moon to have his old 5-minute drive back.
During the time that there wasn't a service, you had to end up getting in Auckland a lot later. The day wasn't as productive, and now we can get up there really ready to start business.
The co-chair of the Kapiti Chamber of Commerce, Julian Hope, was also travelling on the flight this morning. She says the route's return is a real buzz for the Kapiti business community.
It's important for the business community that we have access to Auckland. It's the biggest market. We did know that it was felt pretty hard when Air New Zealand pulled out, so the business community is really welcoming Air Chathams in here.
Chris Orchard, who runs the airport's cafe, says he feared for his business when Air New Zealand left the region, concerned a lack of foot traffic would spell an end to the family-owned operation. But he says the community rallied to keep the business afloat, taking time out to visit the cafe. Mr. Orchard says now that the Auckland route is back up and running, his business is getting back on track.
It's a welcome change, and we're really looking forward to working with them, a family-run business, so it's going to be good for us. It's awesome for the community and the business community that use the service, and it's a fantastic addition, and we're really looking forward to moving forward with it.
Each plane has 31 seats, which Air Chatham spokesperson Adrian Ali admits may be a challenge to fill. But he's optimistic about the future of Air Chathams and Kapiti because he says the community has been nothing but supportive.
We've been welcomed with open arms here in Kapiti, similar to all the other regions we've been servicing, and the support from the local community has been overwhelming, and that's really great for the success of any route.
A few locals huddled together in the rain this morning, eagerly watching the first departure and hailing it as a win for the small coastal town. For Checkpoint in Wellington, Katie Doyle.
Thanks, Katie. Let's go back to Taranaki, where Robin Martin, our excellent Taranaki reporter, is joining us live. Robin, it's been a foul old day there, or afternoon, I understand, but a tornado. What can you see where you are?
Well, look, I'm on the corner of Belt Road and St. Auburn Street, and Belt Road has been one of the streets that's been hardest hit. There's a fire and emergency cordon up here, 5 or 6 emergency vehicles, and you can see them stretched right the way Belt Road, which is a long, it runs kind of parallel to the sea or perpendicular to the sea. All the street lighting is out. I can see a tree down just a wee way from me, and I've spoken to local residents who described the storm just, hitting town, a big thunder cracks, the windows rattling, and then this, what we can only suppose is a small twister touching down. Apparently the bowling club's been hit pretty bad, but I can't see that. And people have talked about all their outdoor furniture being thrown around and trees coming down, this kind of thing.
So St Albans the main drag, isn't it? So you're really close to downtown New Plymouth here.
Well, it's about 2 or 3 kilometres out from what I would consider the CBD, but it's the main thoroughfare through to the port.
Right, and so are you north of town or south of it, Robin?
I would describe it as west.
Okay, thank you. And it's passed, it's gone. So the tornado has just done its thing, done its damage and moved on.
Yeah, we also had torrential rain this afternoon, and that storm hit around about 5 o'clock. So I negotiated it on my way home, but now it's not. We don't even have rain. There's no wind. There's nothing, and you can actually see the night skies peeking through the clouds as well.
Thanks, Robin. Really appreciate it. Robin Martin, west of town on St Albans Street in New Plymouth. Just before we go, hi John, as an ex-Mid-Canterbury cropping farmer, I supplied grain and store to 5-star beef at Wakanui. Their animal welfare management is world class. The inputs into the feed system are top quality, and you would struggle to find better feed and more content animals anywhere. Safe, and Fish and Game are just up to the usual tricks. This is a system producing beef for a niche market, and they do it very well, says Mike. Thank you for your feedback. Have a great night. We're back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A tornado that has hit coastal parts of New Plymouth has terrified locals, blowing out windows, tearing off roofs and ripping branches from trees. The Prime Minister says the government is freezing MPs' pay at current levels and wants to reassess the way increases are determined in future. A woman will appear in the Suva High Court next month, accused of receiving money from Feroz Ali, who was convicted in 2016 of human trafficking offences. The medical director of St John Ambulance has apologised over failures in care for a woman who died from multiple brain injuries after it was mistakenly decided she was drunk. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Pick and mix this week with the funky grooves of Trio Decali and Kronos